This week on Jerusalem Dateline, old tensions flare as Muslim Azerbaijan goes to war with Armenia, the oldest Christian nation, in a decades-old land and religious dispute. And Israel insists Hezbollah is developing missiles in Beirut and hiding behind civilians. Plus, meet an Israeli songwriter and singer who says, "It's enough for me to be God's son." And see how Christians are helping Holocaust survivors during COVID. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl filling in for Chris Mitchell. The nations of Armenia and Azerbaijan are at war. The conflict began in late September, reigniting a decades-old dispute over a region called Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan claims the area, although most living there are Armenian. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, while this conflict is small now, it could get bigger.
In the midst of heavy artillery fire, thousands of refugees are fleeing, while others seek shelter inside the war zone.
Bombing. Buildings and houses are destroyed. We are so afraid of it. How can one stand it? How long will it last?
The disputed area of Nagorno-Karabakh sits here between Armenia and Azerbaijan. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, this self-governed region of Azerbaijan voted to join Armenia. Shortly after, growing tension between Armenian Christians and mostly Muslim Azeris led to war. An estimated 30,000 died in that war. When the fighting stopped, Armenian forces controlled Nagorno-Karabakh, while the international community recognized it as part of Azerbaijan. The conflict remains unresolved to this day. As for this current conflict, both nations blame the other, while the UN is calling for it to end. Many Armenians view this fight through the lens of the 1915 genocide, when Turkey slaughtered 1.5 million Armenians.
It is absolutely not inflammatory language when I say that this is Turkey's policy to continue the Armenian genocide. Let us look at what Turkey is implementing in the Mediterranean, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq. To me, there is no doubt that this is a policy of continuing the Armenian genocide and a policy of reinstating the Turkish Empire.
Family Research Council Senior Fellow Leila Gilbert told CBN's Gary Lane it's more than a territorial dispute.
It is definitely a religious conflict, and one of the things that's very hard to find in the regular media is that that's the reason. It's usually referred to as ethnic or territorial, but it is clearly religious, and at this point, Turkey has jumped in with mercenaries, actually jihadis, and this is making it all the more volatile. His agenda is a neo-Ottoman empire, as far as anyone can tell, with him as the caliph.
And that's why Turkey's President Recep Erdogan takes this stance.
The brotherly Azerbaijani state has started a major offensive to defend its own lands and to liberate Nagorno-Karabakh, which is under occupation. The Azerbaijani army, which is advancing successfully on the front, has liberated many places. With all our capability and all our heart, we will continue to be by Azerbaijan's side.
French President Emmanuel Macron accuses Turkey of sending Syrian jihadists to the fight. An international human rights advocate, Baroness Cox, reports that Turkey is now controlling air operations for Azerbaijan. CBN News has learned several European parliaments are discussing telling Erdogan they will not come to the aid of Turkey as a NATO member if requested, and are urging the U.S. to do the same. The UN, Russia, and the U.S. have called for a ceasefire, but Azerbaijan says it will be conditional on Armenia's withdrawal from Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia, a declared Christian nation since the year 301, and its people see this as a struggle for survival, with nowhere to turn but to God.
And it goes back to the 3rd century, to the time of Saint Gregory, when he brought Christianity.
Sergei Rakoba of Mission Eurasia is calling on intercessors to contend for the spiritual destiny of Armenia.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Christian nation of Armenia now and challenging the entire Christian family around the globe to pray, to support, to remember them when they are trying to defend their sovereign territories in their nation now.
In the meantime, the fighting rages on. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Israel's military insists that Hezbollah is building missiles in 3 sites in Beirut, Lebanon. The Iranian-backed terror group denies the charge, claiming they're simply civilian industrial sites. But Hezbollah is clearly feeling the pressure to go further and prove its claim. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the world last month that Hezbollah was again manufacturing precision-guided missiles to use against Israel. He showed his proof to the UN General Assembly.
This is the Beirut neighborhood of Janah. It's right next to the international airport. And here, Hezbollah is keeping a secret arms depot.
Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah denied the accusation, going as far as to take reporters on a nighttime tour of the Janah location.
We came today to confirm that this facility is a normal industrial facility in this area for years. It's a facility that is working, and you will take a look through it. In front of all media organizations, we will show their lies first, because we're broadcasting live to all local Arab and foreign media outlets.
Netanyahu wasn't so precise about what's in the site. It was a missile depot, arm depot, explosive depot. But the IDF spokesperson were quite precise that it's a manufacturing site. So you don't necessarily have to see missiles there.
Military expert IDF Reserve Brigadier General Asaf Orion says the important thing is to look beyond the surface.
So on the operational side, you saw no missiles, but Israel was pretty quick on its feet to show the exact machines, their use, and even identifying Hezbollah members by name, saying this is the guy, this is his job.
The IDF also tracked a transport truck leaving one of the exposed sites and arriving at another one.
All of this comes in period when Hezbollah is facing serious sensitivity in the public after the Beirut port explosion, which was devastating. And on September 22nd, we saw another explosion in Kana, southern Lebanon, which they tried to mask and divert.
Backed by Iran, Hezbollah operates as both a terror organization and a political party. That combination forces it to hide operations while not alienating the public.
So the system is clear. Iran is an enabler. It builds forward capabilities, and it runs an indirect warfare, a long twilight war against its rival by proxy.
Within hours of the UN speech, Nasrallah moved to appease the Lebanese public while putting together the press tour.
I think Hezbollah was shocked to see how exposed it is, and the promptness of reaction shows that it's under serious stress to vindicate itself in front of the Lebanese public.
And the high-profile press tour paid more dividends than expected.
In fact, unwittingly, it allowed Israel inside reconnaissance services showing what's inside and trying to vindicate itself that there are no missiles, but there was a lot of other stuff to see. And thank you for letting us see.
Coming up, Israel's continuing COVID lockdown and a virtual visit to a special guest in isolation.
CBN Films presents.
It's a very corrupt period in Jewish history at this time.
Written in stone, Jesus of Nazareth.
The emotion is one thing, but the scientific truth is something else.
The life of Jesus changed the entire world.
Jesus walked on this particular street.
But what does archaeology say about where he lived his life?
It's an authentic location in the life of Jesus.
Join Gordon Robertson and unearth remarkable discoveries.
Is it really the place where Jesus spent his last night on earth?
Explore where Jesus traveled.
Jesus went from one Jewish place to another Jewish place.
Where he performed miracles.
And he raised the little girl from the dead.
And where he was tried by Pontius Pilate.
Tradition is wrong.
Get Written in Stone, Jesus of Nazareth. For a gift of any dollar amount, call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/writteninstone.
That changes everything.
A new wave of anti-Semitism is sweeping the globe, and the Jewish state faces hostility at every turn. Now is the time for Christians to support Israel. In CBN's free booklet, Why Christians Stand with Israel, You'll discover why Christians support the Jewish state and why we must stand together with the Jewish people. Get your free copy today. Call now or go to cbn.com/standwithisrael.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
As Israel wraps up the fall biblical holidays and heads into its fourth week of lockdown, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants the strict closure to continue. That means all non-essential shops and businesses, as well as most schools, are closed. Israelis are confined to an area within about a half-mile from their homes, with some exceptions. It also means a mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone flying into the country. Joining us now from what Israelis call bidud, that's quarantine in Hebrew, is our very own CBN Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Chris, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline and welcome back.
Julie, it's great to be back on Jerusalem Dateline. Great to be back in Israel. As you know, I was in the States for several weeks, ended with a time at the return just about a week, actually 2 weeks ago, when there was this large gathering of Christians to repent on behalf of America. But here I am back in Israel, and as you say, in bidud.
So tell us, Chris, you've been working from home, but what does it mean to be in bidud? Are they checking up on you? Are they making sure you're staying inside?
Well, they are, Julie. In fact, last Sunday, I got a friendly call from the Ministry of Interior, and they asked me if I was home, and I said yes. And then they asked me if I had a balcony or a window. So they asked me to come to the window and to wave to them. They'd actually pulled up right outside my apartment building, and there I was. I waved to them. They said thank you, and then they went on their way. So that's just one way that Israel is checking up on people that are required to quarantine for 14 days. I would add, Julie, it's an unusual experience. It's a little bit like solitary confinement. However, I have this nice apartment I can stay in. But the odd thing is that you really can't even leave your front door. So I'm at the mercy of people like those in the Bureau that are providing me food and things like that. But a very surreal experience, a lot like 2020, not only here in Israel, but around the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've covered this story about Armenia and Azerbaijan this week. You've covered a lot of stories about the Middle East, about atrocities and persecution of Christians. Is this situation the same thing?
Well, Julie, this is where I would compare it to. What happened almost 1 year ago was when Turkey invaded northeast Syria. They had claimed that part of the Kurdish population there represented a threat to Turkey. That seemed like a frivolous excuse. It really seemed to be a pretext for Turkish President Recep Erdogan to expand part of his borders. And I see the same thing happening here. He's allying with Azerbaijan. He seems to be providing them with air support, with military advisors, even troops on the ground. Even French President Macron has said that he is supplying Azerbaijan with Syrian jihadist terrorists. It's the same thing he did last year against the Kurdish population and those in northeast Syria. He supplied Syrian jihadists to be sort of like his frontline troops. And that's what I see happening right now. The Turkish president is trying to expand not only around his own borders, he's trying to expand to Libya. He's actually having a confrontation now with Greece. He's had one with Iraq and now with Armenia. And for many of the Armenians, they see this as almost a continuation of this 1915 genocide against the Armenians that we referred to in our report earlier in the program. Wow. It seems like it's Turkish President Recep Erdogan is really the sort of the mover behind this current conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Yeah, that's we need to remember to continue to pray for them.
That's right.
It's a hard situation. Yeah, and on a more positive note, We continue to see good fruit from the Israeli, UAE, Bahrain deals. Jordan and Israel signed an aviation agreement this week. What else is going on?
Well, right now we see that Lebanon and in Israel are actually having negotiations, third-party negotiations, but the first time in decades. And it may be symbolic, but I think it's really telling, Julie, that here on the Feast of Tabernacles, probably for the first time ever, a sukkah or booth was built in Dubai. And who would have expected this about a year ago? But 2020 has a lot of surprises. We're also seeing more trade, potential trade between the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel. And we expect more nations around this region are going to be normalizing relations with Israel. Some of the good news happening in sometimes a region where there's a lot of bad news.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back in the office sometime next week. And be well. Thank you. Blessings for Shabbat. Up next, meet Israeli singer and songwriter Shilo Ben Hod and hear why he sings "It's Enough for Him Just to Be a Son of God."
Now, for a limited time, you can get 5 of CBN's critically acclaimed documentaries. Experience the rebirth of the modern state of Israel.
The historic bonds between the Jewish people and the land of Israel cannot be broken.
Relive the battle for Jerusalem in the Six-Day War.
Jerusalem is yours, forever.
Discover how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
When people need us, we volunteer and we come and help.
Explore the world of Israeli technological innovation.
We're people of dreams. God gives us dreams. And that's really the roots, I think, of much of our innovation.
And understand the biggest land dispute in history.
Many Palestinian Arabs claim that the Jews stole Arab land. But is that the real story?
This exclusive Israel DVD collection can be yours for a gift of $40 or more. Call now or go online to get your Israel DVD bundle today.
Joy!
From Superbook.
Your mother fell.
What? Your dad went with her in the ambulance.
You may have trials in life, but God will help you through them.
Why doesn't God, I don't know, fix this?
Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook Paul Keeps the Faith, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Our worst situations can be turned for the greatest good when we endure them.
Superbook Paul Keeps the Faith.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship, dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us regent.
Shilo Ben Hod is an Israeli singer and songwriter. I sat down with Shilo recently and asked him about his story, his music, and why in his new song he says, "Daili lihiot bincha." It's enough for me to be your son. Shilo Ben Hod, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. You're a musician, a songwriter. Tell us about your music. What do you call the style of your music?
I write worship music in Hebrew mostly, even some in English. So all of my songs are directed to God. It's pure worship to Him. But the style of the music is very diverse. It goes from popular music into rock or reggae or Middle Eastern music. My music journey started at age 6 when my mom forced me into piano class. And in the beginning I wasn't so happy, but now I'm so thankful for her. So I started writing music actually very young, at age 14. I started writing a few songs. It really blessed my life. It's actually what I'm doing right now, and I believe that's the calling God gave me.
You've been through the army here, and you've gone the way that Israelis have to do here, yeah?
Yeah, I've been through the whole thing. I went to the army for 3 years, got married right in the middle, 1.5 years into the service. I went to public school. Yeah, I experienced all the Israeli experience.
Now, you've just released your second CD. Does it have a certain theme to it?
I call my second album Shuv. Shuv means again, and also can mean to return. So many of the songs speak about returning back to God, and also Him always forgiving again and again. God is constant in His love, and that He always calls us back to Him, and we always have a room and a place to go back to.
One of the songs that we've been hearing is Daily. It's enough for me. Tell us about that song and about the music video that you made with that.
Daily means enough for me. And the song basically speaks about how being a son of God, being a daughter of God, belonging to God is far better than anything. It's more than enough. It's enough for me just to be His son. I was in a point in my life that I had to choose between a very nice offer career-wise and something that I knew what God wants me to do. And I was debating between myself because as a family man needing to care for my family. So I was praying for a few days and God was really giving me peace that I need to go with of course, His plan for my life. By the end of these few days, I had these words on my heart, like, Daily liot bincha. It's enough for me to be your son, you know. The chorus literally says, I don't want gold, I don't want money, I don't want fame. I'll give up everything just to be called your son because that's all I want. That's all He called me to be. So we did a music video for this song. We shot it here in Jerusalem. And I think the special thing about this music video is that it features Jerusalem from the local eye. We don't film in the most regular places that everyone films. We film in the streets and we try to capture the feel of Jerusalem. It's a picture of worshiping together as a family of God, worshiping Him for His goodness and faithfulness to us.
Your little boy really is singing his heart out, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. It's totally from him. We didn't tell him to do any of that. He just did it by himself. He was into it.
Usually, musicians go on tour, promote their music. Now we're in the Corona lockdown. So what's your plan? How are you dealing with this?
Yeah, it's right. We cannot travel so much, but actually much more open doors are being opened, and through technology, through the internet, through different events that usually would take months to organize, you can just create a virtual event with thousands of people. So I've been doing some worship on different events on Zoom and YouTube. But I feel like God is bringing out the album in His own power. So it's good, I don't have to do much.
Where can people find your music? How can they access it? How can they buy your CDs?
The music right now is available on iTunes and Spotify and the major streaming services. Physical copies are not so available right now, and it's difficult to send in mail. But you can search for my name, Shilo Ben Hod, in YouTube, in Google. I'm sure you can find a few videos.
Shilo Ben Hod, thank you so much for joining us on Jerusalem Dateline.
My privilege, thank you.
For more of our interview with Shilo Ben Hod, you can visit our Jerusalem Dateline Facebook page. Still ahead, CBN Israel helping Holocaust survivors during the COVID lockdown.
It was not my grace, but God, that I might come to the Irish nations to preach the gospel.
Now available from CBN Films, I Am Patrick. Get your DVD for a gift of $15 or more.
What brings you back, Roman?
People thought that this mission was crazy, that his efforts to Christianize Ireland were doomed to failure.
From slave to missionary.
Who among you heeds the call?
Why would this man put himself in danger among enemies who do not know God?
From sinner to saint.
Patrick's story began a chain of events that is quite remarkable in the impact that it had.
I am Patrick.
Those are the words that begin the history of Ireland. I Am Patrick. Get your DVD of this inspiring documentary today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
The COVID crisis has forced many older people to stay at home, and in Israel that includes Holocaust survivors like Tanya, who narrowly escaped the Nazi invasion of Ukraine in World War II. Now she's unable to go out to get groceries because of the COVID-19 virus, so CBN Israel brings her food.
Tanya was 14 years old when the Holocaust began in Ukraine. The stress of the recent COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown in Israel has caused Tanya's memories of those terrible times to resurface.
I remember life was so normal until that day. The war started and everything changed. Many of our family and friends died.
Tanya's mother worked at a local hospital, so they escaped on a hospital train. Tanya tended to the wounded as the hospital train accompanied the Red Army along the front lines.
It was very difficult to be around all that blood and death, but we knew what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. I would have felt shame not doing my part to help.
Tanya was honored by the Soviets for her heroic service during the war. Now living in Israel, Tanya had to self-isolate to avoid catching the coronavirus, which means she can't go out to get groceries. So CBN Israel brings her food while taking precautions to keep her safe.
Thank you so much for this food. It's a very noble thing for you to want to help me and other Holocaust survivors without even knowing us.
Thanks to those who support CBN Israel, Tanya is able to get the food and encouragement she needs during this crisis.
I am so very grateful to God to have met you.
That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And remember, he who watches over Israel, and you and me, neither slumbers nor sleeps. I'm Julie Stahl. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.